In this video, we're going to consider mass gain diets and fat accumulation. The two go hand in hand. Now, when we engage in any kind of mass gain or weight gain diet, there will inevitably be some gains made in body fat and to body mass index. To make any weight gains in terms of muscle is going to involve making some gains in fat too. An unavoidable fact, especially in those training naturally, the ones who are actually natural. We see all the time claims of natural muscle gains resulting in huge chest, shoulders and upper body, massive quads, developed legs, combined with a tiny waist and permanent six-pack abs, but without injectable supplements of the performance-enhancing variety. This is not sustainable long-term in our natural state. It's unlikely in our natural state, and it depletes testosterone levels. Get this unrealistic body image out of your mind. It correlates to low testosterone. A man is supposed to have balls. These guys are in the process of completely destroying theirs to place these images before your eyes. Truth is that most muscle gains, and especially those that are genuinely achieved naturally, are going to involve a bit of fat gain too. To build muscle mass without building fat at the same time is extremely difficult. To do this naturally without gaining too much fat is often referred to as clean bulking. Now, when you're clean bulking, this is obviously going to involve gaining muscle mass at a much slower rate, and the quantity of gains is going to be reduced on a clean bulk. This is why a lot of gym regulars and bodybuilders tend to bulk up and then attempt to cut their fat gains before resuming the cycle, because they tend to just pack on mass as much as they possibly can during the bulking cycle. The bulking increases size and mass, and along with that, body fat, and this is inevitable. The cut attempts to shed the body fat while retaining as much of the lean muscle mass as possible. Unfortunately, our bodies cannot build new muscle tissue very fast. The effect is increased significantly the longer you have been training and the more tolerant to exercise you have become. It's a gradual process for the natural athlete, and the more experienced you are at being engaged in regular training, the slower that natural progression will be. Consuming more calories will not necessarily correlate exclusively to gains in muscle. For natural lifters, gains in fat are a lot easier to make than gains in muscle, and no matter how hard you try to limit fat gains, you will be unlikely to make any real noticeable muscle gains at all without also gaining some fat at the same time. This fat gain is not always obviously visible in someone who trains regularly. More often than not, there will be no significant gains in subcutaneous fat around the belly or visible, but more often gains in visceral fat, which accumulates around the organs. It's not so obvious that there's been an accumulation of fat because you can't see it, but it is still there. Although it varies among individuals based upon the extent of the caloric surplus they're observing, types of foods consumed, metabolic rate, whether they're clean bulking or dirty bulking, as to how much of the gains that you make will be fat gains. Clean bulking will result in less fat being accumulated, but will also result in less mass being gained. Dirty bulking will result in more gains being made, but also more fat being accumulated. Now, typically, you should expect to gain a pound of fat for every pound of muscle that you gain. Of course, this is just a ballpark figure, and this will vary among individuals and the exact bulking strategies that they're observing. We're all different after all. Fat accumulation, which tends to be visceral fat during a bulk, leads to increased body mass index and body fat. More body fat has the potential to correlate to increased estrogen levels, and body fat that is not obviously visible is body fat and will still have the same effect even if you can't see it. More body fat doesn't necessarily correlate to visible fat, but these are increases to body fat all the same, and observed over long periods of time, as in the case of men who observe mass gain strategies over periods of many years. This will lead to prolonged and gradual reductions in testosterone production and testosterone levels. These reductions to testosterone levels all add up over time, in years or a decade or more. This amounts to a significant difference, and many are completely ignorant of this. It's not something that people are talking about in this testosterone niche online. Usually this endless cycle of bulking and cutting is observed for many years. There is a lot of evidence that links both prolonged caloric surplus and caloric deficit to reductions in testosterone. But when it comes to health, lifespan, activity, longevity, physical performance longevity into older age, bulking and cutting is by far not the ideal approach. Not for longevity, not for general health, and certainly not for your testosterone levels. Bulking increases your fat stores, which correlates to increases in estrogen. It also decreases your insulin sensitivity, increases the risk of insulin resistance and pancreatic disorders. This puts you at a higher risk of developing diabetes, cardiovascular disease, even cancers in some cases. It can also increase the risk of sleep apnea, developing metabolic syndrome, and developing non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, even strokes in some cases. Suboptimal insulin sensitivity maintained over long periods of time also inhibits your body's ability to gain muscle, which is counterproductive to the idea of a bulk anyway, aimed at increasing muscle mass. It can make gains even harder to come by. Being insulin sensitive results in faster and more efficient uptake of nutrients. As gains become harder, this is probably why so many mass gain guys end up quitting being natural and end up jumping on steroids or TRT. When it comes to cutting, which is usually it comes immediately after the bulking phase is finished, you stress the body further by going into caloric deficit, which in itself increases cortisol production to abnormally high levels and decreases testosterone in the process. There is a decrease in strength and an increased risk of injury while you were on a cut. There's a potential decrease in resting metabolic rate. In fact, you end up with such an imbalance that your metabolism is riding a continual roller coaster and doesn't know where the hell it's at. Bear in mind, the effects described will be strongly influenced by the extent of the cut and the caloric deficit observed. Also, bear in mind that we are all different and the effects will vary among individuals. Only fair to mention that. Now, bulking and cutting causes you to be in a constant state of bodily fluctuation, and no bodily or mental balance can ever be obtained while you are engaged in doing this. And yes, caloric surplus and caloric deficit also have a corresponding effect on mental state. An obvious fact to consider in terms of mental state is that a sense of general body dysmorphia often arrives if you're not getting the results that you desire. You want to be big, but you also want to be conditioned. The two go against each other. You become disheartened because you've failed to reach this false perception of the ideal testosterone physique that's circulating online. This is of course fueled by unrealistic body images promoted by enhanced social media influencers. It's causing a constant state of changes in the body, which is up and down like a roller coaster. What affects body also affects mind and mental state, and this dissatisfaction contribute towards poor mental state and raising levels of stress, and this will mess with your natural cortisol cycle. A state of balance must be observed in body and mind to obtain optimum testosterone levels. With this internal imbalance, when it comes to physical performance, aerobic endurance and optimal oxygen uptake, they all suffer because you're in a constant state of digestion during bulking, while strength declines during the cut. You're not consistent. The well-known social media influencer and ex-professional bodybuilder Greg Doucette, who has a channel here on YouTube, he once quite rightly stated that the average enhanced pro bodybuilder in their prime is about as healthy on the inside as an obese person is. This is completely true. The only difference, the fat mass is not so obvious or even visible, but it's still there, accumulated around the organs as visceral fat. The bodybuilder looks fit and healthy on the outside, but the obese person, overweight person does not. But on the inside, they're roughly the same, and their internal condition is roughly the same. It's similar. In fact, overweight people tend to outlive bodybuilders. There are too many premature deaths in the bodybuilding scene for this to be denied. In an enhanced lifter, this fat gain and the depletion of natural testosterone production happens relatively quickly, usually in the complete destruction of natural testosterone in, no more than a couple of years. Sometimes this can be rebalanced and natural testosterone production can be restored, but in the majority of cases, natural testosterone production cannot be fully recovered. It's a fact. In the natural lifter, this same result takes many years, often in excess of a decade, but the result is similar. This will gradually chip away at your testosterone levels over time, day by day, and it's by such small degrees each day that you will be unlikely to notice any difference until the obvious symptoms of low testosterone begin to arrive, usually in your 40s. In your ignorance, you will put this down to your age and think that you need TRT. If you ever want to look to increase mass or to lose weight, do so gradually. Avoid doing it quickly. This is the best tried, tested and proven way, and the results will be more consistent. Weight loss rapidly is often put back on. Mass gained quickly is often lost. Better still, and this is certainly the best approach for testosterone, with testosterone in mind, is to reach your genetic potential and then observe maintenance calories. Develop a lean and wiry physique. Your older body and your older healthy testosterone levels will thank you for it in years to come. Think about this. There are millions of men in their 20s with great physiques. They're common. No respect to young men with great physiques, but you are pretty common. The real challenge is not one of size or mass. The real challenge, the ultimate pinnacle of gym gains, is retaining that great physique along with the great fitness levels for decades to come. Truth, how many old guys do you see out in public with the physiques they had in their 20s? Not many. Of those millions of 20-something guys with great physiques, more than 95% of them will not keep that into their 50s, 60s or beyond. And of that small percentage that do manage to keep their youthful physique, in the modern world, more than half of them are likely to be on TRT or hormone replacement therapy of some kind. Think long and hard about your future. Where do you want to be at that age? In the next video, we are going to debunk the myth that cardio is not so good for testosterone levels. Cardio, in fact, is essential for optimum testosterone levels. Subscribe to this channel and follow this series for more.